Good afternoon and welcome to our fourth panel discussion of the afternoon on this second day of the School and Nursery Show here in Dubai. My name is Fiona Cottam and I'm the principal at Heartland International School. And this afternoon I'm joined by a panel of expert practitioners from across the city representing a range and dynamic range of different curriculum schools in the city as well, each of whom I'm sure will be able to share their thoughts with us on a topic that is an absolutely huge topic. And I think we've all agreed before we start that we could spend hours on this. But I'm delighted to be joined by Anupama Munga, who is the Senior Academic Supervisor in charge of the school at Global Indian International School. I'm also joined to my left by David Williams, who's the head of primary at Regent International School. And I'm joined by Mr. Bruce Major, who is the school principal at the Collegiate American School here in Dubai. And as you can see, I've got all this information written down on my phone. I'm trying to sort of keep everything electronic as we go. The questions will come in from you, our audience, our guest audience at home over the course of the show. So I'm not checking emails, I'm checking your questions. But it's pertinent and it's appropriate that our topic for this afternoon is social media, iPhones, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, the rules of the game, how to and what not to do, and what's the right age to start. Well, goodness gracious me, if ever there was a $64 million question, this one is it really. Where to start with the question as she sits with her iPhone. But David, I'm going to throw you in at the deep end and I'll start with you. I mean, right, wrong age, where do we start? Where do we begin the discussion?
I think we'd be remiss not to start by saying that they do have age limits for a lot of these platforms, but how well enforced they are is the issue, and how difficult it is to enforce those. And then you go down the path of saying, well, okay, then we need to completely ban children from social media. But if you do that, you aren't preparing them for the real world. Just like we teach them how to deal with social situations in the real world, this is the way that, especially over the past 12, 18 months, we've all learned, this is the way that children interact and have that sort of sense of community. And by not teaching them properly and having discussions with them about it, they're going to be missing out and make themselves very vulnerable when they actually do access social media online. So it is a very fine balance.
It is a fine balance. And Anupama, as David said, there are very strict regulations in terms of some of these platforms.
Right.
But we got to get with it, don't we? This is the world in which we live, really.
That's how it is. And all our classrooms are in a device now. And that is how the movement of schools has been. It's difficult. It's a very fine line, like he said. And all the children who are told that, the social media might not be a good idea are like, but everything is there. The information is there. But it's again, it needs parental guidance. There are age limits. And I think the parents have to be very careful, especially with Instagram and Facebook. And, there's certain social media which have an age limit of maybe 12 or 13. And if the children are going there at a younger age, I think there are dangers which they might not be aware of. And that has to be told to them. And the parents also need to be careful, because if they are allowing the children to be a part of a social media which has an age limit, it means that they can break boundaries and they can break rules. And I think the parents have to be very careful. Yes, the school will monitor, but there are lots of things which the parents also need to monitor. So it's togetherness. The parents and schools have to go hand in hand. And they have to make sure that the age limits are adhered to. For example, YouTube has an age limit of 18. Right?
Gosh.
So, and but if they have parental guidance, it's 13.
Okay.
So how much of parental guidance, because there might be certain areas of that level which might have violence, which might have inappropriate content. And it is important for the parents to be monitoring that, or the schools, if they are allowing it in the schools, it has to be monitored. And if it is not, then it can lead to depression, anxiety, even bullying.
Bruce, let me throw the same question to you, really. You've traveled, you've worked in different countries around the world and joined Dubai, really, as you said, just 4 months before this pandemic closed our schools down. Technology has very much become part of what we do, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And I think the key for the adults to understand is that these platforms are tools. And just like any tool, it requires an appropriate amount of instruction. And I think some things that we miss sometimes is explicitly teaching students to be responsible with the various tools. Social media the videos, YouTube, all those things can be insurmountable when it comes to the amount of information that's out there and how it can assist students in being successful. I mean, it's all about how we process information, and this digital age is just a dissemination of additional information. And but I think the key is to, like you mentioned, is to involve the adults there. What are the role of the adults in this whole process? And if we explicitly educate our students on the appropriate use, stop not necessarily trying to restrict as much as, because it's going to happen. You can restrict until the cows come home, but students are going to gain access to it, even with age limits. I mean, the degree to which students are just usurping the age limits varies by putting in any birthday they want.
Yeah.
So it's really about just not necessarily trying to restrict access, but really just explicitly teaching them how to use a tool. Just like you would teach a student to use a power tool or teach a student to use a stand mixer, you would teach them how to use the internet, how to use social media.
Yeah. Let's try break down the question, because I think it's just such a vast question, and we could sort of go around in circles on this one. Let's take the phone question first of all. Does anybody have a very strong view? And David, you said yes there before you knew the question, so I love this one. Here we go then. Is there an age that you would say to a parent, it's okay, it's cool for your kid to have a phone? That's an appropriate age. I'll buy you an iPhone for your birthday. Because it is a dilemma. There's lots of peer pressure. There's social pressure. There's lots of questions asked. Have you got a view?
I do. But again, I think it's very difficult to judge that, because over the past 12 months, 18 months, this is the way that people have joined, you use the term as well, community. This is how children are actually accessing these very, very vital parts of their own development that normally they'd be able to do in the real world. They can't do that anymore. So for me to sit here personally, I don't think children should be having phones until they're at least 16. But I know in the real world, that's a much more difficult...
Oh, gosh. David, do you have teenagers?
No, this is what I mean. I don't, luckily. But this is the problem, isn't it? I'm saying that from a perspective in which it's the right thing to do. And I think everybody would know that is the case. But the issue is when they have these devices, which they need to in order to reach out to their friends. Friends is another interesting topic. We need to redefine these terminologies. When we think of friends, we think of our actual friends, whereas they think of friends, they've got 50 million friends on Facebook. If you look at things like Dunbar's theory, which states that you can only actually know 150 people and you can only recognize 1,500 people. This is all scientific research, been going back for years. When we need to redefine these terminologies so we can work with the children in order so that when they do use their phone for social media, it's being used properly and effectively.
Well, I'm going to stick on the phone question now, because I've put poor David through the grill here, but forget about the social media. Let's take off the Snapchat, the Facebook, and everything else that goes with it. Age for a child to have a phone?
Have you heard of techno tantrums? A techno tantrum is a new term which has come up because when you see children in a mall and the parents take away the phone from them, do you see them having a tantrum? It's happening all over because the children are learning to swipe before they can learn to talk at the younger ages. And as they grow older, they're tethered to their devices. It's a part of their body, it's a part of their hand, and we've seen that. And the age, as you say, well, the classroom is in a phone nowadays. If it's a device, and it is in a phone. Zoom calls, the Zoom meetings, everything is in a phone. Forget about children. What about us? What about that one thing? And it's like, oh, let me just check that one email, that one WhatsApp, that one call. It's all of us. We have become slaves to our phones.
So age for a phone?
So the age for a phone, well, again, with parental guidance, I would say maybe 5 or 6, at least limited with maybe some use of adaptive tools.
Different ends of the spectrum here,
So I've got a 10-year gap here, right?
Yeah, with adaptive tools, because I have seen children learning with apps. I have seen children learning some cognition skills also. So if it is controlled, I have seen a 6-year-old learn from a phone.
Okay, we'll hold that thought. Bruce?
I'd say even younger, to be honest with you. I have a little different perspective. I am also a developmental psychologist. So I've seen students, I know about cognitive and brain development, and there's a lot, even motor skill development that students can acquire at a younger age. Again, my perspective is not about restriction, it's about balance. If I had a student who was in a book 24 hours a day, I'd be concerned about that student because they weren't getting a well-balanced mix of developmental and cognitive skill development there. So I don't really see an age limit on their exposure to it. I see it as a balance, and that's again the role of the adults. And how do you moderate that? How do you ensure that a student has a well balance between their literacy skills and their math skills and their motor skills and their social emotional skills? That we look at that whole child development and think about all the tools that we have at our access, at our ready to facilitate the development of those skills. A phone could be a part of that, but the adults, you're moderating that and you're creating that balance for our students.
Right. So screen time versus green time. So
yeah,
I
understand the debate. I mean, I'll throw my hat in the ring as a parent. I remember my son is now 19. It's a bit hard to tell him he can't have a phone at that age, but when he was 11 and went to secondary school, we gave him a really old Nokia, and it was simply so he could phone us if he needed to, and vice versa. It was another couple of years before he got his iPhone, I have to say, because it was a personal decision we made. So I do think that those decisions come down to family, the family need, how the family need to communicate and what they need to do. In terms of the technology aspect, and in terms of using it for an app or for learning or development, I think that's a different debate.
Yeah.
I think we'll have lots of parents who are not too keen on rushing out to Mall of the Emirates to buy their 5-year-old an iPhone as we speak. So I think, a reasonable age of being able to be in charge of a device is the right age to physically buy them one, perhaps. But in terms of using them for technology under controlled circumstances, I don't think any of us are against that, are we?
No, I totally agree that.
There's a great question that's come in actually from outside, even though we haven't quite touched on that social media aspect yet, but the question relates to that. So I think it's a great question. A parent who says, all my kids' friends, 9-year-olds, they're all on TikTok. I'm not keen on it at all, says this parent. Any tips on how to explain to my daughter that it's not appropriate without sounding like I'm being an absolutely horrible mum or making her friends' parents sound as if they're completely irresponsible people? And that is a difficult, difficult dilemma.
Right.
Any advice on that, David?
Well, I think, again, I think we've probably got a bit mixed up there on owning a phone and access to a phone.
Yes.
So I think for you as a parent, it really would be about sharing those experiences with your daughter. And letting them see what TikTok is, have that experience, but under controlled supervision. Because again, these are tools that can have, once they're on these apps and they've got accounts on these apps, they are vulnerable. And again, not only doing it in a controlled manner as part of a family, possibly. I mean, TikTok's full of entertaining content that you could watch safely as a family. But also having those discussions about if you do see something that does make you feel uncomfortable online, who are you going to tell? What is the route? What is the strategy? Because quite often children feel that they're going to be in trouble for witnessing some of this stuff, when in actual fact, of course, they wouldn't be. It's about having that debate and that discussion. And I think schools have a part to play in that. For us, Regent, we've been working with National Online Safety for a couple of years in order for our parents to have access to a wealth of literature. There was a game that popped up the other day, Amongst Us. I'd never heard of it. And yet it's actually, it's overall quite safe. But there are things that parents need to be aware of. And I think it's just that education and discussion and accessing these. And again, having those experiences, but doing it in a controlled and safe manner. I don't think you have to just rush and get your own account. You can do it as a family.
Anupama, in response to this particular question from this parent, TikTok, 9-year-olds, parents not keen.
Right.
What would you say?
I would suggest that the parent becomes a part of the TikTok and monitors the content. If the child really wants to put it up,
you recommend that it's okay to use
she might just do it on the sly, and we don't want that. It could be possible. And she could say, okay, let's put up a mom-daughter TikTok, for example, and we'll do it once a month. So you limit it, and you become a part of the child's journey. And because the child might be enjoying dramatics or some conversations which happen on TikTok, it's like a dopamine. It gives you the good feel factor to see yourself on the screen, and the children are enjoying that. If you stop it, it might just lead to the child doing it on the sly, and we don't want that because we don't know what content the child might be a part of then. So limiting it might help. When you're doing it, what you're doing, and how you're doing it. If the parent monitors that, and the child is insisting, as the parent says, we can just limit the use. I think that would help.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're saying to that parent, it is a challenge. There will be pressures from your child and indeed pressures socially, but as long as, if you as the parent can keep control of it, I think that's the main thing, and that trust exists between the parent and the child, so you can have access, but when I'm there, okay? You know, and we do it in controlled fashions, don't we?
Exactly.
That leads on, Bruce, there's another question that's come in, and it's very much linked, but the question is a simple one. Are there any positives to kids being on social media?
There are a plethora of positive things for kids to be on social media. Again, just starting from a communication standpoint, a socialization standpoint, students socialize with each other. You can now communicate with someone from Timbuktu if you want to. Imagine what that student's learning by interacting with someone from a different country, understanding someone else's perspective, or developing empathy, understanding someone else's plight, or how they experience the things in a different region of the world. That's an amazing tool for students to be exposed to. But even from a classroom perspective in the school, it's all about how students create content. You know, I think we all, in all of our schools, we always talk about moving beyond just project-based learning or hands-on learning to where students are being creators and innovators. And these social media platforms and the technologies associated with it allow students to create their own new content, their own new information. And that's an amazing benefit for parents and students.
Yeah,
schools.
Yeah, David, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean,
use of social media.
I totally agree with Bruce's point. You know, we were talking about basketball earlier. I grew up in the UK, a huge baseball and basketball fan. Didn't have many people to talk to about that. So if I was around now, I would have been able to find my own community, my own voice possibly, and have, you know, discussions and feel included in that, which is we all remember being teenagers. Being included, being part of a community is such an important aspect of development. And if we can make that easier for children to do through online communities, that's an amazing benefit. I think also, I agree with Bruce on creating content. You know, this is going to be, we don't know what job these children are going to have in 20 years' time, but I can probably guarantee that social media will have some aspect of it. Even us, you know, look at schools in Dubai, the way they use social media now compared to 10 years ago. All of our jobs in some way are linked to it. So giving them that opportunity to develop content, but again, it can be done through a safe way. I know recently at our school, I know other schools are doing the same thing. They've got safe spaces where children can upload work that is literally, and content that is literally just accessed by the parents and just accessed by the school internally. And I think that gives them great opportunity to see what it's like, but again, in a safe way. But I think social media's got huge benefits for children. But it's just got to be done in the right way. And
I think that's the key. You know, Anna and Pawan, we were talking about making sure that the right safeguards are in place. I mean, what can schools do to help parents? Because it is a bit of a minefield. You know, what age can they have Instagram? Is it appropriate to have Facebook? What are they uploading on these sites? How do we as schools have a responsibility to help them in relation to, you know, training our young people in relation to correct use of social media? Is there anything that you're doing at your school in particular?
This normally happens, this problem occurs with the primary or the pre-primary students. As they grow older, I think they understand the abstract thinking. They know that they're responsible. Then they learn a little much more. But as they're young, I think Fred Friedman said that 6 to 12 have more concrete thinking. So they just look at the concrete and they take everything and value. But as they grow older, they have more abstract learning. So the parents need to understand, and parents need to support the children. The schools, we as a school are actually guiding us parents and telling them what are the parental guidelines that they can use, how they can place restrictions, how they can give certain timings only for this. And we've told them safe zones, things like meal times, no devices, no social media, bedtime 1 hour before, nothing to be done, bathrooms, maybe when they're driving as well, you know, so they don't, otherwise they're just watching senseless, content. So we have guided them like that. And I think the parents are pretty happy because we've given certain rules and we enforce them in the school as well. So we keep telling children the same thing. So we're both on the same platform, the parents and we, it has to work together.
So we do have a responsibility, don't we, as educators, to help guide our parents.
Right.
Bruce, is there anything particular at your school that you do in relation to social media and safer use of technologies?
Sure. So much of the same thing. It's about education. And so we're educating our parents about the pros and cons of social media, giving them best practices and tips for success. And that's just a running theme through all of our parent information sessions, our parent trainings, because it's a situation where you're not going to prevent anything from happening. As much as we try to safeguard against exposure and students being exposed to inappropriate content, if they want to get there, they're going to get there. And so it's really about having the conversation and equipping parents with the tools and the wherewithal to think through those situations, those scenarios with students, and say, because you're right, at a developmental level, I can process a certain amount of information. And do parents have the skills and the tools to help students process that information? That's kind of, so we see it as a partnership. So at our school, when we do talk about social media, we talk about it in the context of being a partnership. Help us, help you, you help us, as we help our students be successful.
Well, I think the thing to reassure parents is that from use of social media platforms, etc., in schools, because of the accreditations and the inspections that we all go through, whether it's CIS, BSO, COBIS, KHDA, BS, whoever it might be,
Right.
that we've actually got very good safeguarding measures in place so that we do have those protectors and those filters, so that children can't access them in school.
Right.
You picked up on very slightly the guidance that we can give to parents, though, about their networks at home.
Right.
Now, we might not be technology experts, but what might you say to parents about the home situation and how to set up their safeguard and
There are
firewalls?
privacy settings which they can go to. There are safeguards with the Wi-Fi. It's better to give a cable also rather than giving them access through Wi-Fi. It helps them to tether them and also to keep a watch. It also helps them to keep the device away. So for safety of their, you don't know what kind of vibes and what kind of, the area which is around them with Wi-Fi. So we've given them a lot of safety guidelines and we have told them how to use the privacy settings properly.
Okay.
So that the children do not use whatever they don't want. And then they also, if they're not home, parents are working, after 2 hours or 1 hour, whatever they set, the Wi-Fi just goes off. So no matter how much they try, they can't switch it on. So we've given them those links, we've given them those guidelines, and that's how they're pretty cool now. The parents are quite fine with that and they've got the hang of it. But initially, nobody knew anything. And the children knew more than us. They knew how to work around their privacies, they knew how to put themselves on a loop. And when the teachers were teaching, and they would just go nodding and the teacher thought they're there and they were not there.
And you, like I, will remember, because we were here sort of 10, 12 years ago when there was a time when you would go to search something on the internet that you might need legitimately for school, and this big red cross would come up in the middle of screen, and everything was blocked.
Exactly.
So teaching A-level media studies was a nightmare of every teacher in Dubai who took that course, because they couldn't access anything. Everything just a big red circle with a big cross and no access to anything.
Yes.
So we now have freedom, so it's our responsibility and our job to educate better.
It's how to use that freedom correctly and properly so that it benefits the children. And they're not, they're young children, so they should be safe first of all.
David, another question that's come in from a parent, and again, I hate to throw an age one at you, but I'm going to do it because 16 has blown me away on the phone. We're going to have to talk about that one. How, as a parent, do you decide what content I can show my child age-wise? And that's the difficult one, isn't it? I think we just have to refer back to the makers, as it were, don't we? There are age guidance, just like there are with films, PG, etc.
There are. I think one issue, you were talking about children using YouTube when it's got an 18-year-old restriction, but we see children 5, 6 years old on it.
Yeah.
So it really is about parental choice.
Yes.
What's right for your child? What's going to upset your child? No one knows children better than their parents. So it's one thing for it to be age appropriate, but it's also child appropriate.
Yep.
And just making sure that when you're on an application such as YouTube, rightly or wrongly, below 16 years old, they haven't got the ability to scroll through and find something that actually will be upsetting. We've all heard stories of children going down YouTube rabbit holes and being very disturbed by what they see. So unfortunately, it's very, very difficult. It's very time consuming, I'm sure, as a parent. But if you're going to give children access to these platforms, they need to be monitored effectively. It goes back to, again, We've all got a job. We've all got community. Like you said, it used to be a Red Cross. We don't have that anymore. So we have to monitor ourselves, and we have to make sure that what our children are being exposed to is safe, and is not going to be of any harm or consequence, really.
Well, I think we're all in agreement, aren't we? You know, look, this is a huge piece of technology, and it's a gift. And so whilst we have to be incredibly careful, of course we do, and ensure that our children are safe, to withdraw something that is, you know, it is the way of the world today. We need to embrace it, work with it, and teach best practice, don't we?
Yeah.
Right. You know what the parents can do is they can create a playlist of what the children can watch and block the rest. They can do that.
Yeah.
So if I want my 4-year-old or a 6-year-old to watch something, and we already know that she would like some fairy tales or some particular songs, you can make a playlist, and that's all she can access.
Yeah.
So we can do that as well.
It's a vast topic. We
Yes.
could genuinely be here all afternoon. Just final thoughts and final piece of advice and guidance. I'll start with you, David. Do you have anything to share regarding the use of social media, and advice to parents who are listening today?
Yeah, I think, you know, we possibly have to stop the debate of safeguarding online and safeguarding in the real world. I think both are so intrinsically combined now that you can't have that discussion. And I think, what would you expose your children to a room full of strangers in the real world? No, you wouldn't. So what are you putting in place to ensure that they're safe on the online world? And again, with that being said, it's great, you know, sharing national online safety, whatever it might be, but also, are we looking at the child's emotional development? At a Regent, we do positive education, where we're talking about how things make people feel. And having that discussion with children about real world as well as online is really important. And just as a final thought as well, just being very conscious of children's digital footprint at this age.
Yep.
It can travel with them for the rest of their life.
Absolutely. And that's another full conversation, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Pam,
Right.
final words of wisdom for our listeners today.
Yes, I think we have a new term for all these children who are all tethered to media, which is screenagers, if you heard of that. And it really tickles me every time I hear it. But yeah, instead of teenagers, we have screenagers, everybody who's tethered to that. And I think the stranger danger is more now than it was before. Because before, the person would probably come to your door or would meet you somewhere, and now we have to control the content, and whatever the children watch, it's really there. And the best advice for parents would be to monitor really well. Keep a watch on what your children are doing, put in the privacy settings, and put off the geological these settings so that nobody knows your location.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important part which parents normally miss.
But let's not frighten parents. You know, our schools have got those safeguards in place.
Exactly.
Yes,
Absolutely.
in school, yes, but at home,
Our schools have got those systems in
Exactly,
place,
yeah.
and we will help parents to give them the best advice so they can put those same measures in place at home.
Right.
And we do all that we possibly can together as a community. Bruce, final thoughts from you on this huge topic of the day.
So my final thoughts, I think, would be, we all want to keep our kids safe, right? And I would question, safe from what? It's not the device, it's not the technology, it's not the tool that we're trying to keep them safe from. If parents examine what it is that they're trying to keep their students safe from, and start with that as the nexus, and not the secondary thing, which is the iPhone or the iPad or whatever. It's what is it that you're trying to have you keep your students safe from? Let the conversation start there. It does take the parents. The parents have to be a part of the equation, just as schools are a part of it, in educating our students and talking to them, again, either online or in real life, as David mentioned. That's where the conversation should start. What is it that you're trying to keep your students safe from? Not the phone. What is it that you're looking for? What's lurking behind that phone? What's lurking within the social media chats that you're trying to keep them safe from? Have the conversation about that. That's the only way you're going to build resilience for your students. Because yes, you can't be with your student 24 hours a day. If they want to get around it, they're going to get around it. So in order to generalize that behavior, you just got to teach them how to be a decent human being, how to have empathy for other people, how to keep yourself safe. Those are things that we have to start with. And that way, if they see a stranger danger in a van, I'm going to run away. If I see a stranger and enter my chat group, I'm going to run away because I've educated the student accordingly. So my advice would be focus on the what. What is it that you're trying to protect your students from, and address that with your students, and teach them the capacity to generalize that behavior online or whatever medium that they encounter. The technology is just a tool.
I think we're all agreed today that, you know, technology is one of the greatest gifts that we've had, and I can't imagine my life without my device permanently stuck to me. So, you know, I empathise with those teenagers who are just beginning those journeys and want to explore and develop. In the words of my 15-year-old at the time, when I asked him how to do something one day, he looked at me aghast and said, "Just YouTube it, Mum." And it's a great learning device. So let's put technology to the best use we can, which we do in our schools. Let's reassure you as parents that we're putting the correct protocols in. And let's also reassure you that we're here to help guide you and work with you. But we stick to the age limits. If it's a, you know, PG-12, stick to PG-12. The same with Instagram, with Twitter, whatever those are. Don't have the accounts and don't support those accounts. Facebook is 13. You know, don't go in there until your children are old enough and mature enough to manage and develop it. But if you want to give them access outside of that, then be with them. Be there as you would through any form of danger or safety in the world. Look, on behalf of the School and Nursery Show, we've opened a huge debate here today that we could have spent all afternoon discussing the benefits and the pitfalls and the dangers. But thank you so much to Bruce, to Anupama and to David for joining me today. We're really grateful to have listened to your advice and your thoughts on the use of technology and social media and phones. And on behalf of the School and Nursery Show, thank you to all of you who are joining us from home or wherever you might be. These recordings will be available for a number of weeks, so please do tune in and listen and share with your friends. Thank you very much and good afternoon.